Good morning, my kiddos. I hope that you all are safe and staying healthy and that you are doing what is being asked of you by your family. I know that I have an amazing group of kids and that each one of you are doing what's necessary to take steps to being safe and healthy. So I wanted to do something fun since we can't be together in person in class. I wanted to get a book that I thought maybe a lot of us haven't been exposed to before and do a read aloud every day to you. So I'm going to be reading a chapter book to you guys, and we're going to be applying our comprehension strategies, but also I'm going to be occasionally posting videos of Miss Martin reading picture books too that are fun. You need to go on Newton's website if you get a chance and check out the guest readers. One of them may be your teacher that was recorded, and they'll be on the website every day. I'm so grateful for each of you for taking charge of your learning already, and I love that you have self-monitored and that I have kids that have already finished mission 5 of Zern. Wow. As well as Lexia and Khan Academy. I'm getting notifications on, and I've even had a kid already read a ReadWorks article and submit it to me. So I appreciate that you are willing to step up and monitor your learning and do what's necessary while we can't be together. So keeping in mind with the read aloud and the chapter book, while I'm reading, I thought it would be fun for you guys to just enjoy, as if we were in the classroom and I was reading aloud to you, but also to keep up on those comprehension skills, making connections and predictions and determining the character's traits and motivations, and uncovering the plot, or you guys know the BME, right? So as I'm reading the beginning of the chapter book, I want you to focus in on the B, the beginning. Who are our characters? What is the setting? Now, while you're thinking about the setting, remember our setting changes over time, right? A book doesn't just stay in one spot. The characters move, so therefore the setting can move, right? So the book that was suggested to me is a book that I've actually never read before, but every teacher that I've talked to, and even the librarian and the people at Barnes & Noble, when I went a couple weeks ago and did some book shopping for us, suggested this book. And the book is called Fablehaven, and it's by Brandon Mole. So before I read you the synopsis of what this book is about, I just kind of want you to take a look at the cover. And right now in your mind, I want you to think of a prediction. What is something that you think that this book is going to be about? And after you've made a prediction, I want you to kind of look at the book, the cover. Can you make a connection? Can you make a text to text, a text to self, a text to world? What type of connection on the cover can you make? So when I went and I got this book, the first connection I made is to the Magic Tree House. And I made this connection because I can see the little boy here, right? And in the background, I see, if you look really closely, there's a little girl down there. And right away, I see this kid climbing, and I think of Jack and Annie, right? And all their wonderful adventures. And I kind of was excited because I thought maybe this book will have some connections throughout that are similar to the Magic Tree House. So I'm going to read you the synopsis on the back of the book. This is what the book is going to be about. For centuries, mystical creatures were gathered into a hidden refuge called Fablehaven to prevent their extinction. So we know extinction is just like the dinosaurs, right? It means that they're no more. The sanctuary is one of the last strongholds of true magic. Enchanting? Absolutely. Exciting? You bet. Safe? Well, actually, quite the opposite. Kendra and her brother Seth have no idea that their grandfather is the current caretaker of Fablehaven. Inside the gated woods, ancient laws keep order among the greedy trolls, mischievous satires, plotting witches, spiteful imps, and jealous fairies. However, when the rules get broken, powerful forces of evil are unleashed, and Kendra and her brother must face the greatest challenge of their lives to save their family, Fablehaven, and perhaps even the world. So after I read that synopsis, I hope that you are as intrigued as I am. Keep in mind that the connection that I've already made is that Kendra and Seth seem to be a lot like Annie and Jack from the Magic Tree House. For my kids that are wondering, this is an AR book. It's a 4.8 and it's worth 11 AR points. So when we get back to school, if you're interested in finishing it, then I want you to check it out with me, and I absolutely want you to enjoy Fablehaven with us. Chapter 1 is called A Mandatory Vacation. Can you connect right now with this chapter title? I sure can. Kendra stared out the side window of the SUV, watching foliage blur past. When the flurry of the motion became too much, she looked up ahead and fixed her gaze on a particular tree, following it as she slowly approached, streaked past, and then gradually receded behind her. Was life like that? Could you look ahead to the future or back at the past, but the present moved too quickly to absorb? Maybe sometimes, not today. Today, they were driving along an endless 2-lane highway through the forested hills of Connecticut. "Why didn't you tell us Grandpa Sorensen lived in India?" Seth complained. Her brother was 11 and heading into the 6th grade. He had grown weary of his handheld video game, evidence that they were on a truly epic drive. Mom twisted to face the back seat. "It won't be much longer. Enjoy the scenery." "I'm hungry," Seth said. Mom started rummaging through a grocery bag full of snack food. "Peanut butter and crackers?" Seth reached forward for the crackers. Dad, driving, asked for some almond roca. Last Christmas, he had decided that almond roca was his favorite candy and he should have some on hand all year long. Nearly 6 months later, he was still honoring his resolution. "Do you want anything, Kendra?" "I'm fine." Kendra turned her attention to the frantic parade of trees. Her parents were leaving on a 17-day Scandinavian cruise with all of the aunts and uncles on her mother's side. They were all going for free. Not because they'd won a contest. They were going on a cruise because Kendra's grandparents had asphyxiated. Grandpa and Grandma Larson had been visiting relatives in South Carolina. The relatives lived in a trailer. The trailer had some sort of malfunction involving a gas leak, and they all died in their sleep. Long ago, Grandma and Grandpa Larson had specified that when they died, all their children and their spouses were to use an allocated sum of money and go on a Scandinavian cruise. Their grandchildren were not invited. "Won't you get bored stuck on a boat for 17 days? Kendra asked. Dad glanced at her in the review mirror. "The food is supposed to be incredible. Snails, fish eggs, the works." We're not all that thrilled about this trip," Mom said sadly. "I don't think your grandparents envisioned an accidental death when they made this request. But we'll make the best of it." "The ship stops in port as you go," Dad said deliberately, redirecting the conversation. "You get to disembark for part of the time." "Is this car ride going to last 17 days, Seth asked. "We're nearly there," Dad said. "Do we have to stay with Grandpa and Grandma Sorensen?" asked Kendra. "It'll be fun," Dad said. "You should feel honored. They almost never invite anyone to stay with them." "Exactly. We barely know them. They're hermits." "Well, they were my parents," Dad said. "Somehow I survived." The road stopped winding through the forested hills as it passed through a town. They idled at a stoplight, and Kendra stared at an overweight woman gassing up her minivan. The front windshield of the minivan was dirty, but the woman seemed no intention of washing it. Kendra glanced up front. The windshield of the SUV was filthy, smeared with dead bugs. Even though Dad had squeegeed it when they last stopped to refuel, They had driven all the way to Rochester today. Kendra knew that Grandpa and Grandma Sorensen had not invited them to stay. She had overheard when Mom approached Grandma Sorensen about letting the kids stay with them. It was at the funeral. The memory of the funeral made Kendra shiver. There was a wake beforehand where Grandpa and Grandma Larson were showcased in matching caskets. Kendra did not like seeing Grandpa wearing makeup. What lunatic had decided that when people die, you should hire a taxidermist to fix them up for one final look? She would much have rather seen them alive than on a grotesque display in their Sunday best. The Larsons were the grandparents who had been a part of her life. They had shared many holidays and long visits. Kendra could hardly remember spending time with Grandpa and Grandma Sorensen. They had inherited some estate in Connecticut around the time her parents were married. The Sorensens had never invited them to visit, and rarely they made the trek out to Rochester. When they came, it was generally one or the other. They had only ever come together twice. The Sorensens were nice, but their visits had to be infrequent and brief, so no real bonding could occur. Kendra knew that Grandma had taught history at some college and that Grandpa had traveled a lot running a small importing business. That was about it. Everyone was surprised when Grandpa Sorensen showed up at the funeral. It had been more than 18 months since either of the Sorensens had visited. He had apologized that his wife could not attend because she was feeling ill. There always seemed to be an excuse. Sometimes Kendra wondered if they were secretly divorced. Towards the end of the wait, Kendra overheard Mom cajoling Grandpa Sorensen to watch the kids. They were in the hallway around the corner from the viewing area. Kendra heard them talking before she reached the corner and paused to eavesdrop. Why can't they stay with Marcy? Normally they would, but Marcy's coming on the cruise. Kendra peeked around the corner. Grandpa Sorensen was wearing a brown jacket with patches on the elbow and a bow tie. Where are Marcy's kids going? To her in-laws. What about a babysitter? 2.5 weeks is a long time for a sitter. I remembered you had mentioned having them over sometime. Yes, I recall. Does it have to be late June? Why not July? The cruise is on a time frame. What's the difference? Things get extra busy around then. I don't know, Kate. I'm out of practice with children. Stan, I don't want to go on the cruise, but it's important to my parents, so we're going. I don't mean to twist your arm. Mom sounded on the verge of tears. Grandpa Sorensen sighed. I suppose we could find a place to lock them up. Kendra moved away from the hall at that point. She had quietly worried about staying with Grandpa Sorensen ever since. Having left the town behind, the SUV climbed a steep grade. Then the road curved around a lake and got lost among the low forested hills. Every so often they passed a mailbox. Sometimes a house was visible through the trees. Sometimes there was only a long driveway. They turned onto a narrower road and kept driving. Kendra leaned forward and checked the gas gauge. Dad, you're under a quarter of tank, she said. We're almost there. We'll fill up after we drop you kids off. Can't we come on the cruise? Seth asked. We could hide in the lifeboats. You could sneak us food. You kids will have much more fun with Grandma and Grandpa Sorensen, Mom said. Just you wait. Give it a chance. Here we are, Dad said. They pulled off the road onto a gravel driveway. Kendra could see no sign of a house, only the driveway angling out of the side of the trees. Tires crunching over the gravel, they passed several signs advertising that they were on private property. Other signs warded off trespassers. They came to a low metal gate that hung open but could be shut to prevent access. This is the longest drive in the world, Seth complained. The farther they advanced, the less conventional the signs became. Private property and no trespassing gave way to beware of 12 gauge, and trespassers will be persecuted. These signs are funny, Seth said. More like creepy, Kendra muttered. Rounding another bend, the driveway reached a tall wrought iron fence topped with fleur-de-lis. The double gate stood open. The fence extended off into the trees as far as Kendra could see in either direction. Near the fence stood a final sign. Certain death awaits. Is Grandpa Sorensen paranoid? Kendra asked. These signs are a joke, Dad said. He inherited this land. I'm sure the fence came with it. After they passed through the gate, there was still no house in sight. Just more trees and shrubs. They drove across a small bridge spanning a creek and climbed a shallow slope. There, the trees ended abruptly, bringing the house into view across a vast front lawn. The house was big, but not enormous, with lots of gables and even a turret. After the wrought iron gate, Kendra had expected a castle or a mansion. Constructed out of dark wood and stone, the house looked old, but in good repair. The grounds were more impressive. A bright flower garden bloomed in front of the house. Manicured hedges and fish ponds added character to the yard. Behind the house loomed an immense brown barn, at least 5 stories tall, topped with a weather vane. I love it, Mom said. I wish we were all staying. You've never been here, Kendra asked. No. Your father came here a couple of times before we were married. They go the extra mile to discourage visitors, Dad said. Me, Uncle Carl, Aunt Sophie, none of us have spent much time here. I don't get that. You kids are lucky. You'll have a blast. If nothing else, you can spend your time playing in the pool. They pulled to a stop outside the garage. The front door opened and Grandpa Sorensen emerged, followed by a tall, lanky man with large ears and a thin, older woman. Mom and Dad and Seth got out of the car. Kendra sat and watched. Grandpa had been clean-shaven at the funeral, but now he wore a stubbly white beard. He was dressed in faded jeans, work boots, and a flannel shirt. Kendra studied the older woman. She was not Grandma Sorensen. Despite her white hair streaked with a few black strands, her face had an ageless quality. Her almond eyes were black as coffee, and her features suggested a hint of Asian ancestry. Short and slightly stooped, she retained an exotic beauty. I'm wondering right now who this woman is standing next to Grandpa Sorensen. I'm predicting. Could she be a fairy? Could she be a witch? I guess we better keep reading and find out. Dad and the lengthy man opened the back of the SUV and began removing suitcases and duffel bags. You coming, Kendra? Dad asked. Kendra opened the door and dropped down to the gravel. Just place the things inside, Grandpa was telling Dad. Dell will take them up to the bedroom. Where's Mom? Dad asked. Visiting your Aunt Edna. In Missouri? Edna's dying. Kendra had barely ever heard of Aunt Edna, so the news didn't mean so much to her. She looked up at the house and she noticed that the windows had bubbly glass. Birds' nests clung to the eaves. They all migrated to the front door. Dad and Dell carried the large bags. Seth held a smaller duffel bag and a cereal box. The cereal box was his emergency kit. It was full of odds and ends he thought that would come in handy for an adventure. Rubber bands, a compass, granola bars, coins, a squirt gun, a magnifying glass, plastic handcuffs, string, a whistle. This is Lena, our housekeeper, Grandpa said. The older woman nodded and gave a little wave. Dell helps me tend the grounds. Aren't you pretty? Lena said to Kendra. You must be around 14. Lena had a faint accent that Kendra could not place. In October? So the clue that gives me in this book a hint that Lena is somebody that is a mystical creature is that when Kendra is describing her, she describes her as ageless. So I'm wondering who she is at this point because she talks about having certain features, Asian ancestry. She talks about her voice. So I'm curious who Lena is. And if Lena is a mystical creature, does that mean Dale is too? An iron knocker hung on the front door, a squinting goblin with a ring in its mouth. The thick door had bulky hinges. Kendra entered the house. Glossy wood floored the entry hall. A wilting arrangement of flowers rested on a low table in a white ceramic vase. A tall, brassy coat rack stood off to the one side. Beside, a black bench with a high carved back. On the wall hung a painting of a fox hunt. Kendra could see into another room where a huge embroidered throw rug covered most of the wooden floor. Like the house itself, the furnishings were antiquated, but in good repair. The couches and chairs were mostly of the sort you would expect to see while visiting a historical site. Dale was heading upstairs with some of the bags. Lena excused herself and went to another room. Your home is beautiful, Mom gushed. I wish we had time for a tour. Maybe when you get back, Grandpa said. Thanks for letting my kids stay with you, Dad said. Our pleasure. Don't let me keep you. We're on a pretty tight schedule, Dad apologized. You kids be good and do whatever Grandpa Sorensen tells you, Mom said. She hugged Kendra and Seth. Kendra felt tears seeping into her eyes. She fought them back. Have a fun cruise. We'll be back before you know it, Dad said, putting an arm around Kendra and tussling Seth's hair. Waving, Mom and Dad walked out the door. Kendra went to the doorway and watched them climb into the SUV. Dad honked as they drove off. Kendra fought back the tears again as the SUV vanished into the trees. Mom and Dad were probably laughing, relieved to be off by themselves for the longest vacation of their married lives. She could practically hear their crystal goblets clinking, and here she stood, abandoned. Kendra closed the door. Seth, obviously as ever, was examining the intricate pieces of a decorative chess set. Grandpa stood in the entry hall, watching Seth and looking politely uncomfortable. Leave the chess pieces alone, Kendra said. They look expensive. Oh, he's all right, Grandpa Sorensen said. By the way he said it, Kendra could tell he was relieved that Seth was setting the pieces down. Shall I show you to your room? They followed Grandpa up the stairs and down a carpeted hall to the front of a narrow wooden staircase leading up to a white door. Grandpa continued on up the creaking steps. We don't often have guests, especially children, Grandpa said over his shoulder. I think you'll be most comfortable in the attic. He opened the door, and they entered after him. Braced for cobwebs and torture devices, Kendra was relieved to find that the attic was actually just a cheerful playroom. Spacious, clean, and bright. The long room had a pair of beds, shelves crowded with children books, freestanding wardrobes, tiny dressers and unicorn rocking horse, multiple toy chests, and a hen in a cage? Seth went straight for the chicken. Cool! He poked a finger through the slender bars, trying to touch its orange gold feathers. Careful, Seth, Kendra warned. He'll be fine, Grandpa said. Goldilocks is more of a house pet than a barnyard hen. Your grandmother usually takes care of her. I figured you kids could mind filling in while she's gone. You'll need to feed her, clean her cage, and collect her eggs. She lays eggs? Seth looked astonished and delighted. An egg or two a day if you keep her well fed, Grandpa said. He pointed to a white plastic bucket full of kernels near the cage. A scoop in the morning and another in the evening should take care of her. You'll want to change the lining of her cage every couple of days and make sure she has plenty of water. Every morning we give her a tiny bowl of milk. Grandpa winked. That's the secret behind her egg production. Can we ever take her out? The hen had moved close enough for Seth to stroke her feathers with one finger. Just put her back afterwards. Grandpa bent down to put a finger in the cage, and Goldilocks instantly pecked at it. Grandpa withdrew his hand. Never liked me much. Some of these toys look expensive, Kendra said, standing beside an ornate Victorian dollhouse. Toys are meant to be played with, Grandpa said. Do your best to keep them in decent shape, and that will be good enough. Seth moved from the hen cage to a small piano in the corner of the room. He banged on the keys, and the notes that clanged sounded different from what Kendra would have expected. It was a little harpsichord. Consider this room your space, Grandpa said. Within reason, I'll not bother you to pick things up in here, as long as you treat the rest of the house with respect. Okay, Kendra said. I also have some unfortunate news. We are in the height of tick season. You kids ever heard of Lyme disease? Seth shook his head. I think so, Kendra said. It was originally discovered in the town of Lyme, Connecticut, not far from here. You catch it from a tick bite. The woods are full of ticks this year. What does it do? Seth asked. Grandpa paused for a solemn moment. Starts out as a rash. Before long, it can lead to arthritis and paralysis and heart failure. Besides, disease or no, you don't want ticks burrowing into your skin to drink your blood. You try to pull them off and the head detaches. Hard to get out. That's disgusting, Kendra exclaimed. Grandpa nodded grimly. They're so small you can hardly see them, at least until they fill up on blood. I wonder why Grandpa's trying to keep the kids out of the forest. Then they swell to the size of a grape. Anyhow, point is, you kids are not allowed to enter the woods under any circumstances. Stay on the lawn. Break the rule, and your outdoor privileges will be revoked. We understand one another? Kendra and Seth nodded. You also need to keep out of the barn. Too many ladders and rusty old pieces of farm equipment. Same rules apply to the barn, apply to the woods. Step foot in there, and you'll spend the rest of the time in your room. Okay, Seth said, crossing the room to where the little easel of paint stood. A blank canvas rested on the easel. Additional blank canvases leaned against the wall nearby, besides shelves stocked with jars of paint. Can I paint? I'm telling you twice. You have the run of this room, Grandpa said. Just try not to destroy it. I have many chores to attend to, so I'll not be around so much. There should be plenty of toys and hobbies to keep you busy. What about a TV? Seth asked. No TV or radio, Grandpa said. Rules of the house. If you need anything, Lena will never be far. He indicated a purple cord hanging against the wall near one of the beds. Tug the cord if you need her. In fact, Lena will be up with your supper in a few minutes. Won't we eat together? Kendra asked. Some days. Right now I need to visit the East Hayfield. May not be back until late. How much land do you own? Seth asked. Grandpa smiled. More than my fair share. Let's leave it at that. I'll see you kids in the morning. He turned to leave and then paused, reaching into his coat pocket. Turning back, he handed Kendra a tiny key ring holding 3 miniature keys of varying sizes. Each one of these keys fits something in this room. See if you can figure out what each unlocks. Grandpa Sorensen walked out of the room. Closing the door behind him, Kendra listened as he descended the stairs. She stood at the door waiting and then gently tried the handle. It turned slowly. She eased the door open and peered down the empty stairway and then closed it. At least he had not locked them in. Seth had opened a toy chest and was examining the contents. The toys were old-fashioned but in excellent condition. Soldiers, dolls, puzzles, stuffed animals, wooden blocks. Kendra wandered over to a telescope by a window. She peered into the eyepiece, positioned the telescope to look through a window pane, and began twisting the focus knobs. She could improve the focus, but couldn't get it quite right. She stopped fiddling with the knobs and examined the window. The panes were made of a bubbly glass, like those in front of the house. The images were being distorted before they reached the telescope. Unfastening the latch, Kendra pushed the window open. She had a good view of the forest and east of the house. Illuminated by golden hues of the setting sun, moving the telescope closer to the window, she spent some time mastering the knobs, bringing the leaves on the tree below into crisp focus. "Let me see," Seth said. He was standing beside her. "Pick up those toys first." A mess of toys lay piled near the open chest. "Grandpa said we can do what we want in here. Without making a disaster, you're already wrecking the place." "I'm playing. This is a playroom," Seth said. "Remember how Mom and Dad said we need to pick up after ourselves?" "Remember how Mom and Dad aren't here?" Seth replied. "I'll tell." "How? Stick a note in a bottle? You won't even remember by the time they get back." Kendra noticed a calendar on the wall. "I'll write it on the calendar." "Good, and I'll look through the telescope while you do that." "This is the one thing in the room I was doing. Why don't you find something else?" Kendra said. "I didn't notice the telescope. Why don't you share? Don't Mom and Dad also tell us to share?" "Fine," Kendra said. "It's all yours, but I'm closing the window. Bugs are coming in. Whatever." She shut the window. Seth looked into the eyepiece and started twisting the focus knobs. Kendra took a closer look at the calendar. It was from 1953. Each month was accompanied by an illustration of a fairyland palace. She turned the calendar to June. Today was June 11th. The days of the week did not match up, but she could still count down to when her parents would return. They would be back June 28th. "This stupid thing won't even focus," Seth complained. Kendra smiled. All right, my loves, that was chapter 1 of Fablehaven, and right now I am super intrigued. 1, I want to know who Lena is. 2, I want to know what's in the barn. Why do they have to stay out of a 5-story barn? Is it really for their safety, or could there be something lurking in the barn? And 3, the telescope. I wonder if it's going to play an important part in the book. So tune in tomorrow for chapter 2 of Fablehaven.